Any questions? Actually, yeah, before I open it to questions, I just had an article published in the Alta, and it was prompted by 3 particular questions. So I'll ask myself those questions, and you can ask me any questions you want. The first question was, why did you write this book now? So, as a friend recently pointed out, Bruce Springsteen, who's my age, was recently asked that question, and he replied, so I can write down details while I still remember them. In my case, I felt my career had reached a certain plateau. Can I put the microphone on? Yeah, so, okay. So, I felt that my career had reached a certain plateau that might not be reached again. Many of my teachers and fellow students, Leon Kirshner, Carol Busa, David Del Tredici, John Adams, Stephen Stuckey, Chris Rousseau, each received a Pulitzer Prize. In the case of Ellie Siegmeister, had at least been nominated for one. This had not been the case for any work of mine or any work by the composer I most identify with, mentor and friend of Siegmeister and Leonard Bernstein, Mark Blitzstein. But that changed in December 2022 when my completion of Blitzstein's self-styled magnum opus, the opera Sacco and Vanzetti, received the Pulitzer nomination. I didn't win, but at least I got nominated. Not knowing whether that would ever happen again, I decided it was time for a look back. What led to that, along with my 75th birthday, which was celebrated in concerts at the Bryant Library, where I grew up, and at the Hewlett-Woodmere Library, repository for music on Long Island. And there was an exhibit, actually, at the library here. Sheila photographed me with it, I remember that. The autobiography of another mentor of mine, Jack Beeson, the composer of Lizzie Borden and several other beautiful operas, was a kind of a model. In fact, it's just 1 page shorter than mine, 561 pages. His publisher was Mellon Press in Lewiston, New York, and they offered me a contract. So I started writing, and then I learned that his book is in very few libraries, and it's priced at $312. And I asked whether that could be changed, and there was no response. They simply canceled my contract. So I started writing, but needed to find a publisher. McFarland in North Carolina toyed with me for 6 weeks and then said no. The SUNY Press expressed interest, but demanded a shorter book focused on topics of musicological interest, and I said no. Then my friend Ralph Locke helped me find Dorrance Press, the oldest and largest self-publisher in the country, with a catalog that includes 50 books on music, 450 autobiographies. We decided to go with them. The process was arduous. I never had direct contact with folks during the so-called editing, during which every semicolon disappeared and had to be reinstated to by me by hand, which took weeks. Both the typeface and the margins are smaller than had been expected, so the book is actually more easily read on screen as an e-book, which many friends are purchasing rather than the paperback. The color version is ridiculously priced at $126, but the black and white version, which we have copies of here, is just $32, and the e-book, which is in color, is only $27. And libraries can purchase the e-book at just $4.04 per borrower, which is a true bargain. In fact, it was such a bargain that Stacy Hammond at the library here said, "That's a steal, I'm going to grab it." So the library here has 2 copies. They have a reference copy in color and a circulation copy in black and white, which I donated. And they bought the e-book, for $4.04 per borrower. Unfortunately, self-publishers do not provide books with copies that can be returned. So I have to purchase them myself, and I make about $1.50 on each book sold at events like this. But at least the Harbor Club of Long Island has just purchased 6 copies in conjunction with their book launch event on Zoom, the event of the evening of October 21st. Please put that on your calendar and come and join the Zoom wherever you are. You don't have to come to Oyster Bay. You can just do it in your living room. So the second question was, what drew you to music in the first place? Now, my parents recalled that I was attracted by and recognized music before I could talk, and before I could read. I was given a toy piano with 8 keys of different colors and some children's song books. I started marking up those books with crayons. People thought I was just doodling, but actually I was using those colors to try to devise my own notation so I could remember the melody before I could read. So after learning to read and starting piano lessons at 7, I would improvise a lot, and I wanted to remember my improvisation, so I began writing them down. That was my first composing. And by age 11, I knew I wanted to be a composer. That's when my parents took me to Ellie Siegmeister. He told them he didn't take students at the age of 11. I looked at all the scores on his shelves that had been conducted by the likes of Toscanini and Metropolis, and I asked him, how long would it take to play all of your music? He said, about a week. I said, well, it would only take about 45 minutes to play everything I've written. Would you like to hear it? So he did. And then he told me to take a walk around the block when he told my parents that he would take me. And I became his youngest and longest student. And that's, where continuator comes from. Third question, well, actually, this is a very vague question about how did interest develop. And I could talk about translation, English, Russian, Yiddish, Hebrew, French, Latin, German, Italian, Ladino, ancient Greek, Osa, Romanian, Spanish. Talk about my Bar Mitzvah cantata, Prayer for Peace, Jewish Voices in Germany, Rosenberg cantata, We Are Innocent. My first musicals, The Comic Tragedy of Sanford Joe, which I wrote with Mark Kingdon. Mark is now a hedge fund manager. He's sort of conservative, but his mother was known as Red Flory. And other musicals, Growing Up Woman, Let's Change the World, E.G., Super Spy, the secret musical about a spy whose mission is so secret even he doesn't know what he's doing. Adam and Milton Eve, Damn That Apple. And the operas, Idiots First, Carla, Seema, Hannah, The Family Men, Birthday of the Bank, New World, an opera about what Columbus did to the Indians, premiered at Heckscher Park. Suppose a Wedding, Sacco and Vanzetti, The Triangle Fire, and an opera for Helene called A Love Letter from Rosa Luxemburg. She said to me, I can't memorize and I can't stand very long. I said, don't worry, this is an epistolary opera. You will sit and read the letters the whole time. She did 4 performances of it, and then Catherine Weekhorst did the German version of it, the 2 letters, and she did it in Hamburg, and then the opening of the... What? Memorized, auswendig, yeah. And then it opened the Nuremberg Contemporary Music Festival in 2019. That was the last time we were in Europe, and when we also went to Romania and discovered the poetry of Mihai Eminescu, and a 92-year-old man named Zygmunt Tauberg, his daughter came up to me and said, will you set some of my father's poems to music? So I did. So we have a cycle of Romanian songs as well.
International, yeah.
January 15th, oh yeah, I'll tell you, January 15th is Ellie Siegmeister's birthday, and I used to kid him, I said, one day your birthday will be a national holiday. And of course it is, because Dr. King was born on his 20th birthday. I conducted I Have a Dream cantata that he wrote on his 80th birthday and Dr. King's 60th at Harlem School of the Arts with the Metropolitan Philharmonic Chorus that I organized. Nancy was there. And it was one of the most really times of my life. January 15th is also the birthday of Mihai Eminescu, the national poet of Romania. And my settings of his poetry have been performed on January 15th several times along the past few years in Romania, in Bucharest. Translation settings, Yevtushenko, Mayakovsky, Days of the Commune, right? What it is. Russian songs, Afanasy Fiat, Ivan Krylov, Gabriel Derzhavin, Pushkin, of course. Yiddish, Lev Nailos, Spanish, Lorca and Neruda. Aimé Césaire, who I discovered in Martinique when we did a pilgrimage there to see where Martin Wittgenstein lived at the end of his life. And completions. The very first one that I did was actually Richard Peasley wrote the score for Marat Sade, magnificent score that we did at Harvard. And I noticed that there was one piece called Marat's Liturgy that should have had music, didn't have music, because the actor who did it originally didn't sing. But we had a magnificent singer named John McCain, who changed his name to Alden McCain. And I wrote music for him to sing Marat's Liturgy. And then I played it for Richard Peasley, and he loved it. And that was the first time, I completed somebody else's work and got it approved. And then there was Blitzstein, of course, and Lehrer, Siegmeister, Berryman, Miracle.
You're going to do that again with completing the...
Yes, I've just submitted an application to the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Guggenheim Foundation, which gave awards to Blitzstein and to Siegmeister. They turned me down once, but I only applied. Blitzstein applied 7 times before he got a Guggenheim. So this is only my second application, but I'm hoping I'm going to get it for an opera that Blitzstein left incomplete. I mean, I've completed 21 of his works. This one I looked at 55 years ago, and everybody said, oh, it can't be completed. He only wrote a scene and a song for it. But he completed the whole libretto. It's to one of the great American short stories, Magic Barrel, the title story in Mount Berta Melliman's very first collection. And it's a magnificent story about a matchmaker, and it's a beautiful story. And he wrote the whole libretto, and a lot of it's in Hebrew. So I was consulting with a friend who's translated 30 Woodstein songs into Hebrew and performed them in Israel, and also with a friend of his who knows his work better than anybody, and was helping with Woodstein's adaptation of it. And I've gotten the approval today, actually, from the Woodstein estate, the Malamud estate, Kurt Weill Foundation, which owns half of the Woodstein estate, and I'm going to go ahead with this, and hopefully with a fellowship, but even without, it will be my 13th opera, and my third Woodstein opera completion, Magic Barrel. That's the next project. I could talk about the year at the Metropolitan Opera. We talk about it for hours. And Heidelberg, Augsburg, Basel, Vienna, Bremerhaven, Berlin, Coburg, Bayreuth. Helene and I gave the first concert in the Bayreuth Festival. That's the Richard Wagner Festival in Bavaria, and in Yiddish, because I was interviewing Wolfgang Wagner. He was the grandson of Richard Wagner, and he had sat on Hitler's knee. And I didn't realize at the time, but his son was giving him a lot of problems and accusing him of anti-Semitism. And I said to him, how can I persuade my friends and relatives in New York and in Israel that there's no more anti-Semitism here in Hitler country? He thought for a moment, and I said to him, and actually I didn't plan this, it was spontaneous. I said, wie wäre es mit einem Konzert hier auf Yiddish? How would it be if we gave a concert here in Yiddish? Turn pale.
Turn paler than his actual white face. In fact, it's kind of like a lavender.
and he took a deep breath and said, "Warum nicht? Why not?" And he sent us to where he said, the place where he said, "We do our Kleinkunst." He spoke German. Well, actually, I asked the secretary, does Herr Wagner speak English? And the answer was, nein, spricht eigentlich Oberfränkisch. Which is a dialect. It's Hitler's dialect. But he spoke to me, and we did a song for him in Yiddish, which was, and I told him it was kind of inspired by Meister Singer and Tannhäuser, and he knew everything but the last word, sof, which means ending the last Hebrew letter, and he said he was honored, and that's when I asked him about the concert in Yiddish, and he said, "Warum nicht?" And he sent us to Pianohaus Steingräber, where we do our chamber music concerts. And we did. This was in 1996. In 1998, we did our concert there, and it was such a success, they invited us back again in 2000. We did another concert there, and this time we brought with us settings of the poet Heinrich Heine, who had also inspired Wagner, even though Wagner wasn't anti-Semite, Heine was Jewish. But Heine's work is magnificent. It's like Brecht, it's like Ogden Nash. I mean, it's so witty and it's so beautiful. And I set a whole cycle of his, and we found hundreds of settings of Heine in 6 languages. So we came and performed Heinrich Heine in 6 languages. One of the pieces was the Lorelei, set to music by Franz Liszt. And Liszt was only a year older than Wagner, but Wagner married his daughter, so he was his father-in-law. He's buried there. And his piano was there. I got to play Liszt on Liszt's piano. It was one of the most marvelous experiences. Matched only by performing Nielsen in his home in Odense.
That's right.
And Brahms's piano in Hamburg. But the list was
This
really
is amazing.
So these are some of the stories that, adventures that we had. Helene said at one point we should call the book The Adventures of a Socially Conscious Cosmopolitan Composer. And I said, no, that sounds too much like Augie March or Tom Sawyer. No, I don't want to do that. No, we call it the autobiography. Rather, think about it, Ben Franklin and Philip Glass and
Yeah, these trips were amazing fun. There was one time we were in Berlin, many times in Berlin, and he went off to Kleist's, where was that? Frankfurt
Under Oder, yeah.
Under Oder,
Yeah, well,
which
that's a
was
fun,
someplace,
yeah.
it was close, it was on the border of what, Poland or
Poland,
something?
yeah, yeah.
And I decided to go to one of the gardens, which turned out to be extremely boring. And he came back with all these wonderful stories
Yeah.
about conversations he had
Well,
and places he visited.
I said, how many of you speak German? That's a little bit. I said, I asked if the train went to Frankfurt an der Oder, and I said, dieser Zug fährt nach Frankfurt an der Oder, oder?
Really?
Or, really?
Right?
Yeah, yeah. So, no, that was a really good experience. And, well, Siegmeister's last opera was written with Guggenheim, and it was based on a play, or a novel, in terms of a play and a movie, by Heinrich von Kleist, whose museum is in Frankfurt an der Oder that I visited. It's the Marquise von O. It's a famous German film and novel and play. And they decided to transport it to Mexico. They called it the Marquesa of O. And it has some lovely music. It's very, very difficult. So it's never actually had a full performance. But I got 4 excerpts translated into German. And when we performed at the Dresden Staatsoper, we did a concert of Long Island composers' music relating to German, and we did those 4 excerpts of Ellie's music in German. That's the only time I think that's ever been performed.
She was the maid song that I sang.
Yeah.
And then Ron and I did a duet.
Yep, yep.
And then what were the
Yeah,
other
yeah,
two?
but
Did
then-
I sing something else?
Yeah, yeah,
It
and
was
Ron has to
hard,
do that.
very hard.
Very
Oh.
good. Yes, question?
What brought you to Oyster Bay?
The job at the library. I had just gotten my degree, I was about to get my degree, and I had an interview here. And I had just written my thesis on concerts in libraries. There were 3 parts to it. It was the history of Long Island Composers Alliance, president at the time, first president. They used to call it chairman. We decided that was sexist, so we changed it to president. And the second part was the history of concerts at the Bryant Library, which is my hometown. And the third part was, actually the opening was about concerts in the library in general. I did a lot of reading and background. And that part of the thesis was published in Wilson Library Bulletin. It was the definitive article about concerts in libraries. So I came and they knew this, and one of the first things that Sue Koch, who was the director, did was to take me to Hofstra and get a piano to bring it to the library, paid for by Billy Joel. So it was a very, very symbiotic relationship, and I've been there now, since March '95, so over 30 years. Nobody else has been there longer. A few people started before me, and they come back every now and then, but they're retired. So, Herb Deutsch used to say, after he was no longer teaching full time at Hofstra, but was still teaching part-time, he said, "I want retirement." And I don't think I'll ever retire. I don't think I can afford to retire. Unfortunately, there's no real pension and or very little for Social Security. God, I hope us, don't let them take Social Security away from us. Right? Question back there? David, you must have David Aubrey is the expert on music at the Great Neck Library, and he's been a member of the Metropolitan Philharmonic Chorus for decades, and he always has interesting things to say.
Yeah, I have a question.
I knew you would, see?
Have you, I'm not sure of this, have you ever written any, I know you've written for piano, but have you ever written any orchestral music
Yes.
that was not vocal?
Yes.
Could you talk about that a bit, or?
Yeah, I've got about 50 instrumental pieces. Many of them are transcriptions of songs. I mean, I've got 20 cello pieces which are based on songs. But some of my earliest pieces were purely instrumental. The pieces, the orchestral pieces I'm proudest of actually were written in the 60s and 70s. There's a flute concerto and a violin concerto. The flute concerto I started writing when I was a student of Siegmeister, and, you know, if I talk about dodecaphony or 12-tone technique, do people know what that means? 12-tone technique means that you use all 12 notes of the scale only once in what's called a row, and then you take that row and you permute it, you take it backwards and upside down and backwards. This is called 12-tone technique or dodecaphony. And it's kind of mechanical, but it inspired a lot of composers. Schoenberg invented it or discovered it, and late in life Stravinsky actually emulated it as well. But a lot of composers, including followers of Nadia Boulanger, kind of didn't think very much of it, including Siegmeister. And so I brought in a piece that had a 12-tone melody, and he looked at me and said, 12-tone, huh? And years later, a fellow named Don Robbins was his tennis partner, and I was playing doubles with him, with my father against the two of them. And I hit, Ellie and I were at the net, I hit the ball past him. He went, "Help! I'm being beaten by a 12-toner!" So, that flute concerto has been performed many times with piano. It is not. It had a reading. 2 movements had a reading at Harvard, and unfortunately the tape broke, and it was. I don't have a recording of it, and I don't have a performance of it, but I do have, you know, parts for it. The violin concerto became my master's thesis. Oh, that's another. Yeah, she loves it.
It's a gorgeous piece.
That's had performances with 3 different violinists with piano. It actually, the orchestration won an award for from the National Opera Association composition competition, but it's never been performed with orchestra. Well, it can't be until I do the parts, and I will do the parts eventually, especially if I get a performance. But three violinists have played it. First one was Janet Packer. Well, Nadia. I finished it working with Nadia Boulanger, and she really liked it very much, and told me that she would get Régis Pasquier, very fine violinist, to do it. And he looked at her and he said, "Impossible." And then there was another violinist named Alain Molia, who said he would look at it, and he looked at it, and he played it, he said, "Impossible." But he said, "Oh, he'll come and play it, and he'll come to rehearsal," and then he called in sick from sick in France. It was canceled. It was scheduled for premiere in March, the summer play out in Paris. Didn't happen. But then Janet Packer worked on it for about a year, and she did a concert tour with me of Mozart, Brahms, and my piece of Mule. And we did it. We did 2 performances at Cornell, and one at Harvard, and one at MIT, and one at Exeter. And it's recorded, and she did a beautiful job. And I think maybe even better was Cyrus Stevens, who performed it at the Bryant Library for my 50th birthday concert in 1999. And more recently, Daniel Hyman played it at the library here. Yeah, I'd say it's I guess our favorite instrumental piece of mine.
Yes, I think so.
So yeah, those are the major ones. I mean, and I've also written some, you know, quite a bit for piano for hand, piano, 2 pianos. But those are the flute concerto and the violin concerto are my major instrumental works. Then of course, you know, I've got 12 operas and 7 musicals and 200 songs. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
My name is Kendall Joshua.
Kendall.
Kendall, and my last name is Joshua.
Joshua.
I composed myself too. I just graduated
Great.
university.
Which university?
And Mercy University in Downbury from their music production and recording arts program.
Wonderful.
And I'm interested to know if you use any digital audio workstations, you know, in your home studio at all, or how do you, I'm sure you do, but you know, you've been doing this for a very long time, and you've gotten to see technology transform throughout your career. So I want to know, like, nowadays, like, what do you prefer to use as far as, you know, your digital, like Logic Pro or Pro Tools? I'm asking a very technical question.
My brother is a maven in that department. He wrote the book on MIDI.
Okay.
He teaches electronic music, and his class creates invents electronic instruments at Tufts University. His name is Paul Lehrman, and I put him in touch with what's his name? Hold up, I can't remember his first name. Because a composer named
George
Antile created a scandalous piece called Ballet Mécanique, which had a lot of electronic synchronization that was physically impossible at the time, and my brother made it possible.
Wow.
So he's had a career internationally with great
Wow.
conductors doing this work of his that he made possible. He really is the electronic person in our family. I mean, we always say about me and Helene, I'm the feminist and she's the techie. I did some electronic music at Harvard, not very much. I did some at the Buchla at
The Buchla.
yeah,
Okay.
you remember the booklet? And there's a studio on Propetorachgracht in Utrecht, Holland, where I spent a couple of days fooling with electronic music. When I wrote a piece for the Hasty Pudding, which was aborted and then produced independently, called Beowulf or the Great Dane, there's a scene in the forest, and I had these forest sounds coming out, you know, with the electronic music. But that's about all that no, that's not true. I wrote a song, this is a scandal as a matter of fact. I wrote a sonata for piano and tape. And the tape was music concrete. It was, you know, feedback sounds and sounds played at half speed and double speed and so forth.
Years
And
ago.
this was 1968. And I played it in several concerts, including one in Fontainebleau in 1969. And there were glissandos, from the bottom on top, you know, and the piano action was really very, very hard. So when I finished, my hands were all bloody. And Nadia Boulanger was blind at that point. She was sitting in the front row, and she said to me, "Why did they wipe the keyboard afterwards? What was that?" I said, "That was blood, mademoiselle." Yeah, no, nobody wrote anything like that at that time. And it was made into a ballet, as a matter of fact. Joachim, we had a friend, he called himself Joaquin Reyrive. His real name was Joaquin Reyes Rivers, and he's now known as Joaquin La Habana because he does an act in Berlin where he's half female and half male, and keeps turning back and forth. Look him up, Joaquin La Habana, amazing fellow. He did several projects with me in Boston and several in Berlin when I was there, and we're still in touch on Facebook. And he made a ballet of that sonata with piano and tape. You know. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So I have had some experience with it, but really I cede authority in that field to my wife and my brother.
Okay, you're answering my question.
Did I answer your
Yes,
question?
you did, yes.
Thank you for the question.
Yes,
You have a question?
I have a question. I have a question of the audience. Is there are there any composers other than Kendall in the audience? Anybody else?
I have one last question.
Steve is a composer. You've written music.
I have another friend, composer, who wrote very complicated music, and he went to Holland to study music and came back, and he wrote a piano concerto that was so impossible to play. It was scheduled to be performed, but the pianist who was going to play it after a couple of months said, "This is unplayable," and he returned it. And I was just wondering if you've ever come to blows with a musician, such as when J.S. Bach had a tangle with a bassoonist who complained about his music, and they were known to have a tussle because the bassoonist was complaining about his music.
I didn't
I
know
was
that.
wondering if you had any
Well, yes.
similar,
Yeah, something.
anything like that.
Just a minute. Something comes to mind about that. My brother, Paul Lehrman,
Yeah.
was studying with Robert Levin, who was a friend and mentor of mine, also a Monte student. And Paul wrote a piece for piano, which he created a recording of digitally, you know. And it was, yeah, and it was physically impossible to play. And Levin knew that, and my brother knew that. And one time Levin was on the radio answering questions, quiz, and my brother sent in his his assignment, you know, and Levin identified it immediately. That's Paul Lehrman's, which is unplayable. You wanted to say?
Well, you know, I'm his resident soprano. So once in a while he would come up with very grandiose texts. Chief Seattle, I'm remembering, that just was beyond my range and beyond my emotional capacity, and also just was up there loud all the time, and that was a screamer. I tended to call him nasty.
The George Eliot piece, yeah.
And what about the
America.
Catherine Smith piece? The Catherine Smith piece.
Oh, that, from, the Prophet by
A couple of
Yeah.
tough pieces,
Yeah, I've written
which
over-
have since been performed by more dramatic voices.
Well, I've written over 200 pieces for Helene, and she's sung, not all of them, but almost all of them, and she's sung a lot of pieces that weren't written for like E.G., that she's made sound as though they were written for her. So, I always call her my Lottie Lenya, because, I mean, Lenya inspired Kurt Weill, but she also limited him. I mean, because he knew not to write things that were too difficult for her to sing. So, you know, sometimes it's a good thing. Do you want to say something? We're getting toward the end, okay. Last question, anybody? Angelina? This woman has written some of the most marvelous articles about us, and we're just meeting her for the first time tonight.
She asks questions all the time, young man.
That's right, you sent me a whole list of questions.
I have.
Only when she's on the clock, though. If you're good at something, never do it for free.
Okay. It was marvelous.
Okay, well, it's lovely having
Thank you
also.
very much.
We have the air signing.
Yes, there were books up there for purchase if you were interested, and Leonard will happily sign them for you. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. We really appreciate it, and thank you so much, Leonard, for being this evening. It was wonderful.
The first concert, maybe not the last.
Thank